Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jason. Welcome to another exciting episode of the ELAV8 podcast. Today, Sam dials in from the road, and we touch on a myriad of topics. We go from Eastern versus Western medicine, the psychology of the youth, and how they're being affected by technology, and can they interact in a modern society?
What do you think about the idea of a person's life, if you really think about it, being a single cut with a sword, right? There's no do-overs. You don't really get a do-over with any moment. So the question is, if you only get one cut with your life, what cut do you make? And how do you do that? And when you think about that, how does that reframe the way you look at your life? Hello, we'll call this Elevate World, the Elevate World. What do we call it? Elevate People, the Elevate Audience. What do we call the elevators?
I mean, I literally thought about that the other day, the elevators. I'm like, wow, that's so terrible. But hey, you know what? Maybe, I mean, it can be as corny as my transitions. How about that? The elevators, it kind of matches the terrible transitions I've chosen.
Elevators. Look, I'm down. I'm good with it. Like, you know, we'll do elevators with a star wipe, and you know, just rock and roll here.
Show a little chime action on it. You know what I'm talking about? The sound effect.
There you go. Oh yeah, totally. We'll do the chimes, and then a half-assed, like, you know, one of those like fairy whooshes. You know, we'll do one of those too, and I think we're in business here.
I'm obsessed with it. Let's go.
Yeah. How's it going, man? What's happening? We coming to you live from Italy.
Wait, you're in Italy? I thought you were in Japan.
No, I'm in Italy. Okay. At a Korean martial arts tournament. With a bunch of Korean samurai, basically.
Are you competing?
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Well,
how are you? Okay, first of all, oh, what happened?
So I got here. Day one, they have seminars, right? So it's a 10-day sort of 9-day conference, and they have seminars, and then they have 2 days of tournament, and then another 5 or 6 days of seminars, and then they do testing for all the super high-ranking people. The big finale, which is not me. But day one, I was there, and in the first seminar, we were grappling, and then I got up, like everything was fine, and I got up and started walking to go pick up my camera because I'm also the filmmaker here, I guess. And I heard something pop in my leg, and then I couldn't walk, or I was able to walk for a little bit, but it hurt, and then they gave me a painkiller, and then nothing hurt for a while, and I was like, should I trust this? And they're like, no, but I just kept filming on it anyway. And then it wore off, and then it really hurt for a while, and then it stopped hurting again that night, and I was able to walk around. I had dinner, everything seemed fine. I went to bed. I woke up, and then that morning, I got up for some reason, was able to walk perfectly fine. I promise you the story's going somewhere. Then literally 15 minutes later, I put my feet down again, and everything locked up in my knee, and I went into like a 90-degree right angle, and I couldn't move it for like 3 hours. And so and that was when I was supposed to be competing. I thought I'd be able to compete with this thing, and so I wasn't able to compete. I won last year 3 medals, but this year I wasn't able to compete. And then it took me 3 hours to straighten the leg. But here's the point of this, though, Jason. How much do you know about Eastern medicine?
I know nothing about Eastern medicine. Absolutely zero. Big goose egg, which is kind of surprising.
Really? Have you ever had acupuncture? Have you ever energy healing, any of that stuff?
Like Reiki and all that stuff? So here's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know me very well, right? I say yes to everything. So I have had acupuncture. People have done Reiki to me. And to be honest with you, I don't know if I noticed like the effects or not, but I've done it. I was like, yeah, full send, let's go. Like I'm not afraid.
Interesting. So, did you find anything work with the acupuncture?
So, to give you some background, I have a lot of back pain. I'm in pain every second of every single day, and I've just kind of grown accustomed to it. So, it's like I'll try acupuncture, right? And
Uh,
uh, for those that don't know, I used to do parkour, and I've broken like 28 bones in my body, and so I have a
oh,
lot of pain everywhere. Yeah, and yeah, so I tried it, but like I have so much pain, I don't know if it helped or if I imagined it. I don't know. So I'm still on the fence about it.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, I at a certain point, I mean, parkour feels like that's probably a recipe for pain, more or less. It looks
Yeah,
just
you just
very
have to
painful
accept it.
every time I watch it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you get good at it?
I was pretty good at it. Yeah,
Oh,
I
that's
can't believe
awesome. Okay,
I haven't shown you these videos. I have videos. I'll send them to you.
dude. I mean, look, if you need the YouTube hits, this is the parkour is the way to go, man. That's the
Exactly.
um interesting, right? Because well, the reason I ask, right? So is everybody's like done some of this. So anyway, um, long story short, I'm like, think I need to go to the hospital. This is clearly a problem. So uh, the guy, the head of the art, basically is like, hey, let me try treating it tonight, and then if that's a problem, go to the hospital. So anyway, I got 2 treatments. Long story short, I'm walking on it. It looks like the ligament seems to be working. No need to go to the hospital for Western medicine or any of the stuff. And there's nothing wrong with Western medicine, but the reason I ask, right, is like I'm curious, like when you were growing up or anything, had you even like heard that there was another option besides like Western medicine?
All I had was Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi rubbing his hands together and like doing that sound. And then, like, apparently Daniel's son could do the kick, right? That was my exposure
Yeah.
to Western medicine. That was it. So the answer is no.
Okay. Well, look, so that leads to I think an interesting discussion for today, right? Which is how come we don't know about any of this stuff?
Well, I mean, if you want to get deep, and I know you want to get deep, that's why we're having this podcast. Uh, it's all about pharmaceutical companies maintaining their profit margin. At the end of the day, if you were cured of any ailment, whether it be physical or mental or D all the above, right? You would no longer be a profit generating entity for that pharmaceutical company. So they're disincentivized from curing you completely of whatever is affecting you.
Well, I had a cousin who pointed out that they were able to bill through her insurance $1 million for the hospital out of her cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And and so when you think about the numbers on that and how much money is able to be sucked out and generated through the Western medical system just through people's illnesses, versus perhaps treating some of these things holistically, in some cases. and
Mm-hmm.
and the difference in approaches between Eastern and Western medicine is like uh Eastern medicine tries to start at the cause. It tries to
Mm-hmm.
treat the like what's going on the inside, what might be actually like causing. It tries to treat the cause, it also tries to prevent illness, whereas Western medicine only treats the symptoms. And we have a culture that only treats the symptoms of things. And I think that's interesting given the number one cause of bankruptcy in our country is medical bills.
Yeah, I mean, at the root of it, I mean, I don't know. Let me ask you another question, but it ties into what you're talking about. Would you say that Eastern medicine is more compassionate about humanity and love thy neighbor versus Americans? I mean, I don't know
I don't know.
because
I don't know if there's a morality to it so much as it's just a completely different mindset, right? I mean, how much do you understand about like Eastern mysticism, right? Versus, what we grow up with in the States.
so I have a little exposure to that just based on the fact that I travel to India quite often, right? And obviously there is the mysticism relevant in that culture that's, fascinating. And I mean, we're not too far away from it with things like Christianity, etc. It's just more like ritualized, if you will. It's more formalized here in the United States.
Well, but here's the thing, right? So we were talking about Reiki
Yeah,
before, right? But if you think about it, like you think about what Jesus was doing, there's the laying of hands, right? You know,
yeah,
so what is that? And how much different is that really from Reiki? And when you think about like what is actually happening and on an energetic level, this was the thing that like blew on. I never, do you know what ki is or chi or any of the,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So here's something interesting. I had no idea what any of it was when I started training martial arts, which was like 15 years ago. And so I walked in and like they'd have you do these exercises to develop your key power. You know, I was like, what the hell is this? I don't even know what this is. So I'm doing the thing. I don't feel anything happen. And then somewhere down the line, I got into Reiki at a certain point because you can start to feel certain energetic things, and that snapped me back into the idea of martial arts and generating that and realizing that there's an energetic component to things. But here's the interesting thing, right? So there's whether in Asia it's ki or chi. The Hebrew word for life is chai, right? And but it's really, if you think about it, all these languages, it's just a slightly different pronunciation of some of these things. And really, in India, it's prana. It's all the same stuff, right? So all these different cultures have different names for the exact same thing, which is basically life force or energy. And so when you think about that, right, and you think about like our culture, does it ever come up?
No, not unless it's in a Hollywood blockbuster. I mean, that's literally the only time you hear it. It's like, okay, or you're lucky
Yeah.
enough to find martial arts like yourself, where I do believe it comes up in those practices. But universally here in the West, no, it doesn't come up ever.
So like, don't you think that's interesting? That like we're just completely unaware of like any of it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like here in the West, we've abandoned the ability to think in new ways, right? Like we've become a society that's so structured and it's so formalized, and even how like we stand up and pledge allegiance to the flag, right? Like we're programmed. I feel like the United States is probably the most programmed nation on the planet at the moment. And if you have these ideologies that are, to be quite honest, so different and, in a weird way, and not in a negative way, radicalized, they're radical ideas that it's really hard for us in the West to break our programming.
So I'll just throw a couple of concepts out at you. And like, can you imagine doing this? Can you imagine living in a society where you have a martial arts master, right? And this person's going to show you a very complicated technique that could completely subdue someone's arm and, via joint manipulation and all of this or hand, right? And they only show it to you once ever, and you're expected to remember it and be able to do it and reproduce it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Versus our culture where everything is videotaped and every single thing is there to be watched and rewatched and rewatched and rewatched. Can you imagine if you asked the average Westerner to just like watch something one time and be able to completely duplicate it?
No, but this comes back to my idea of programming. Do you know, right, that the worst thing that's ever happened to our brains is the mobile phone, right? The ability just to search information. You don't have to retain information. You just know how to have to get to it. You just need to know the steps it takes to get to it. So the idea of what you're just, proposing to me right now is actually the most radical thing I think you've ever said on this podcast, because our expectation in the West is that that's never going to happen. And what you're talking about is a beautiful thing, because it's actually training you to be more present at all. Actually, you're being present way more at all times, and what you're, putting forth, rather than to now our expectation.
Now, note, I thought when I was told about this that this was the craziest thing I ever heard. You could not possibly do this, and it's something that I work towards, right? Being able to do that. But what's interesting to me about it, right, is this culture, right? So I'm busy. Meanwhile, the irony of this is I'm in there filming everything that's going on with an iPhone. And
Mhm.
I'm literally going around in a gimbal, filming the entire tournament, doing everything there is and doing this. So the odd part is I'm westernizing what's going on, to assist with marketing and and all the things that's happening for the art. So um it's an interesting sort of like dichotomy where, like, I mean, look, on the one hand, I totally think we are missing an insane amount of things when it comes to mindfulness and all of this stuff based on what I just talked about. But on the flip side, the absolute power to be able to learn or find anything on the internet just by typing something into Google and being able to access that information just so you could watch that video in the first place is also mind blowing, because if you think about the scalability of knowledge and information, it's very, very hard to scale that level of concentration that I was just talking about in the society. So is it better to then have people be 70% dumber, but probably 30% smarter overall? I don't know. It's a formula.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It just comes back to like humans' inability to maintain like a healthy grasp over these technologies, right? Like the reason why drug addicts exist is because, I'm about to say something controversial, but I promise you there's a point. Drugs at the root level are awesome, right? If drugs didn't suck, then nobody
Mm-hmm.
would, do them, right? And I'm just making a parallel between technology and drugs for a second. I know it's an extreme parallel, but bear with me for a second. That dopamine release every time you scroll through Instagram and you double tap the like button, or versus someone double tapping the like button on you, it releases that dopamine, triggering a euphoric response. We've become so addicted to that feeling that we're no longer present in the things that you're talking about and proposing. You're always present in the moment, and there is a finite availability of those things that are being taught to you, whereas the internet is always on 24/7 and you never have to put your phone down.
It's just a question, right? You have to ask yourself, what are you trying to accomplish, at a certain point, and what does better really mean? And how do you leverage these various different things? It probably could be said that learning 4,000 techniques in a martial art is maybe not the best use of your time, unless you like the idea of, like, it just depends on what, like, for me, the way that it applies spiritually, mind, body, like heart, spirit, all of that stuff is very beneficial when you can actually do some of these things, and the amount that you gain in learning how to do like a single technique correctly, which is very hard.
Mm.
Uh, like just doing something right and learning how to do something right. When I look around society, I'm like, very few people know or care about how to do that.
So actually, let's back up for a second, because let's not gloss over the fact that you said, maybe it's not a good use of someone's time, all right? And you were talking about the reasons why people do it. Let's do something we don't do that often. Let's isolate Sam Messman. Let's just go in on the root of why. Like, why are
uh,
you participating and practicing these arts, right? You chose that word specifically. You didn't say combat sports. You didn't say, karate, kung fu. You did say samurai, but that's just cool. Like you said, art. So why have you chosen this discipline, and why are you focusing on this art, and why would you consider this a part of yourself?
all right. Well, there's the reason that I started to do it, which was a fairly funny story. And then there's the reason that I do it now. So I used to box, and I used to, and I got pretty good at it. And you spar, you figure out how to move and things like that. And then I moved out to LA, and you couldn't, I had a hard time finding a good boxing gym, out there. And, I used to, when I first moved out to LA, I used to play poker semi-professionally between edit jobs, because it was the writer's strike and things were tight when I first moved to the city. So I would go play poker and then wait for edit jobs to magically appear. And one time I got really hot, and I was like, okay, well, I should go do something for myself. So I was like, I always wanted to learn martial arts. I was like, it felt like the next evolution. So I just like Googled martial arts in my area. The first one that came up was Hwarang-do, which is the one I currently study, which is the Korean martial art. 59 generations old theoretically, and it is anyway. Long story short, I'm like, I don't know what this is, so I was like, but it was the closest one in walking distance to me, so I walked over. I come outside. This guy comes up to me and he's like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "Well, it's on the website. It's this martial arts. I'm interested in martial arts." He's like, "I don't have time for this." Um, so go back, look at the website. If this is what you want to do, come back tomorrow and we can do. But I don't have time for this right now. I got to go sword fighting on the beach. And that was the best answer or sales pitch I'd ever heard. So I was like, well, of course, if you have that level of confidence and you're like, go away, I don't even care. I'm like, now you have my attention. So I went back uh, and I went in. I did the first workout. I almost died. I walk into the back office and he's like, hey, we got 3 plans. We got bronze plan, silver plan, gold plan. And the gold plan, of course, which was the black belt plan, was for literally the exact amount of money I'd won playing poker. So I still had the cash in my wallet and I just took it out and handed it to him. And he was like, this is really weird. And that's how this started. And so, but I knew literally nothing. I knew nothing about Eastern. I'd always been kind of curious, like, oh, yin yang, what's that about? How does this work? But you, like you said, right? You might have seen a couple movies and you're like, oh, and you grew up with Karate Kid and you're like, oh, that seems cool. And I love Big Trouble in Little
Mhm.
China. So I was like, all right, sounds like a plan. Let's give this a shot. And then you find out and also I watched, I'd done a boxing documentary. I boxed and, and I'd watched MMA and I knew I definitely didn't want to do MMA. And, so anyway, long story short, you start and then you find out about everything else, which is like there's 4,000 techniques. This is a combination of stand up grappling, uh, jujitsu, aikido, basically, which is joint manipulation, weapons, and throws, judo. It's literally everything. There's 4,000 techniques. You cannot possibly learn all of it. And for me, I was like, okay, well, I don't like to be on the treadmill. This sounds like the best way for me to get in shape. And so I got in really good shape when I was out in LA training. Then I left, started a company, Luma Forge, gained 100 pounds, got burnt out, and then picked it back up during the pandemic and have been training remotely the last few years and have gone to the world championships the last couple of years, which is where I am right now. But I'll finish with this, which is there's a lot of really interesting concepts that I think get lost on the idea. But what do you think about the idea of a person's life, if you really think about it, being a single cut with a sword, right? There's no do-overs. You don't really get a do-over with any moment. So the question is, if you only get one cut with your life, what cut do you make?
Mhm.
And how do you do that? And when you think about that, how does that reframe the way you look at your life?
Man, okay, that's real deep. Okay, I didn't expect you recording at midnight to come with some absolute gems. So that was fantastic. I even just marked it so when I'm editing this later, I can just be like, okay, that's the moment I want for the intro. So I mean, yeah, what you said is basically just true. Let's just acknowledge that. That's true. There is no like metaphor in that statement because you do only have one life. So I find that very powerful and it's great,
Well, not necessarily. Depends on how you feel about reincarnation, but that's for another show. However,
Oh God. You're tugging on some threads here. But no, you asked me how I feel about it, right? Here's the truth. I like direct. I think you know that about me. I like just direct. If we're gonna have a confrontation, let's have a confrontation. Let's just deal with it, get it out of the way. If we're gonna, go into business together, let's just be honest about what we want and so on and so forth. That's the most honest portrayal of, hey, if you're gonna study this art, you have to have the discipline to maintain it because if you don't, then what are you doing here?
like, if you think about our culture, I mean, that doesn't really fit.
It doesn't. It doesn't at all, actually. No. No, but that goes back to programming, Sam. This whole entire conversation, right, is ultimately going to circle back to programming. And America today has been just so devastated by the programming instilled upon us, right? And I know everybody talks about, and when we were young, grandpa used to say, back in my day, right? And maybe we're at that
Mhm.
point in our lives, it's like back in my day, but when we were growing up, I felt like people were more free with their ideas, relevant to freedom of speech, etc. And you could insert, a Republican with a Democrat, and they would have a lovely, conversation. They may disagree, but it wouldn't be so violent and, these radical differences. And I feel like today, programming has completely isolated our ability to think beyond what we know.
So, but what is the programming exactly? Like, what do you think people are being programmed to do?
Oh man. All right, so I'm not a conspiracy theorist, even though I do like watching them. You do know this about me. I'm very open-minded. I
I love
just believe
watching
it's
them.
so much.
They're
I
phenomenal.
know they're great. They're phenomenal.
Why do people
It's
hate
just
them so
I
much? Like, I mean, you don't have to believe them. You can just
exact
entertain the story.
That's perfect. I'm glad you said that. That's absolutely perfect. And I do not believe in anything QAnon at all, right? But I watched the whole entire like Fall of Cabal series on YouTube. It's one of like the bigger ones. And the reason why I watched it was like I want to see what these people are watching this for and why they believe it. And I'm going to circle back to your question previously about what's the reasoning behind it. Is that when I watched that, I realized that people were just looking for something different. They were looking for answers that help make sense of the world around them. And the world as it exists today isn't actually made to do that. It's actually to say, you go to school, you get a job, you go to college, and you raise a family, and that's it. You basically work till you die. That's it, right? So people are looking for something more. Now, what's the point of programming people to do that? You ask that question. So let's answer it. It's to maintain stability, maintain stasis, to maintain an organized society that doesn't really ask questions. Because when you ask questions, or if you push against the status quo, it instills a chaos that, yes, can instill growth in society, but it makes it harder to push society in a direction that you view it should go. And it's my belief that those in power today want absolute power, and they want to push society in a direction that benefits their interest.
Ah, so you think it's just about money. So there's a lot of money in keeping people stupid.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about it, right? Like, war is profitable, right? That's not an inflammatory statement. That's just true. War is profitable. It's profitable for the oil industry, it's profitable for arms, it's profitable for insert basically anything, and you can profit off of war, right? So if you push society towards war, a lot of people are going to make a lot of money, right? And that's just the way it is. And you could say the same thing about the pandemic. The pandemic was great for pharmaceutical companies. It was good for Pfizer, especially Johnson and Johnson. Great. Moderna, great. They were very profitable companies. And whether or not you believe like in masking or taking the shot, not taking the shot, that's not the point. The point being is that there was a global media presence that shoved this ideology down people's throats to a point, whether or not it was true or not didn't really matter, but those companies were profitable based off of that information that was presented to them.
Interesting. And but when you look around our society, it's interesting in that like I can't tell if we're actually smarter or dumber because I certainly didn't grow up with Google. The amount of information that I can access at the drop of a hat versus having to go to the library and go like through the Dewey Decimal System and like go and like find a book and then realize, oh, well, this book isn't really what I was hoping for and all of that stuff. I think I'm able to get access to things far faster, or literally just think about the Amazon bookstore versus having to go to like Barnes and Nobles and like track things down and
Mm-hmm.
see if everything's there. So like if you're interested, you can find anything. But I think in a lot of ways, because there's so much choice out there, it's literally I wonder if we're being programmed or everybody's just literally on their own choose your own adventure book and a lot of people are picking really really boring stories.
It's the latter. I mean, I, hmm. All right, let's talk about something real quick because I want to chime in what you said because it's beautiful. It's beautiful and it's way too deep. We could spend a whole podcast on just that. But let's just back up and just I think we'll both agree on one statement, which is our lives today are objectively better than anyone that lived before us 200 years ago. All right. And I mean, like, we live like royalty. We have the accessibility to get strawberries at a convenience store anytime we want. Not a convenience store, a grocery store.
Mhm.
I doubt you want strawberries for a convenience store. So just ignore I said that. But the availability, the opulence of the life that you have today versus the past, I feel like it's inarguable it's better. So let's go back to immediacy versus are we smarter or are we dumber? All right, that's a very great question. So I'm going to make 2 points. The first being is that I genuinely believe that our critical thinking skills are far
Mm.
less superior than they were in the past. Critical thinking has greatly diminished, meaning that I have the ability to discern what I should and shouldn't do, and I will discern whether or not I should
Mm.
invest in something based on the time allotment that I have, right? So I believe critical thinking has just completely diminished. Now, the availability of information, as you just put forth, is absolutely true. Anything, all times, available whenever you want it. But since our critical thinking skills have greatly diminished, we don't know what we should be doing with that time and how we should be spending it. And the last piece I'll make,
Mm.
a statement I'll make is you actually, me, we're equal in this, are not more intelligent. We are not. We believe we're more intelligent because we're reliant on those technologies. We know how to use those technologies, but we ourselves are not more intelligent. We just know how to access information more quickly.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, I like, and also we might
Uh,
be hyper focusing on stuff, because that's what you do now, right? If you live in a society where you have to work all day to just like provide for yourself and just put food on the table, and all you've got to do is like carry water to and from, there's no electricity, there's no comfort, there's no time for navel gazing. You literally just have to go survive in your world, right? But
mhm.
we don't. That's not really the case, to the point where if any of us had to go survive in the world that people used to have to go survive in, we would die. It's not even
We die.
close.
So let's even be more gracious. All right. I challenge you, Sam. And by the way, you challenge me right back. I wouldn't be able to do it. I would challenge you to be able to navigate from where you live. Okay. Actually, where you are right now, let's make it even more complicated. Without the aid of the internet or a phone, navigate from where you're at right now, okay, to Los Angeles or to your home. It would be so monumentally difficult for you to do that. You would have to navigate to a travel agent. You wouldn't be able to use a phone, right? You have to use a phone book or
Mhm.
how hard you want to make it. Do you have any idea how hard that would be?
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, I think what you meant to say is without using your phone, right?
Without using your phone, without using the internet.
Without using the internet, right? So at this point, well, I don't even know that you can at this point, because think about it, like, how would you book airfare? Can you even pay in cash for airfare anymore?
You absolutely can. You can get to the ticket gate, the ticketing gate. You can present your credentials and you can purchase a ticket. But before
You
you
can
do
still do
that,
that?
you have to, yeah, you just have to be able to get there. How do you get there? And by the way, if you don't have the right currency, right, you have to convert your currency. You have to
Okay,
go
no.
to a
So I could do
currency
it.
conversion
I
booth.
could do it. So check it out. I could totally do it. So here's how I would do it. From here, knowing that I could do that, here's how you do it. So you go to the hotel lobby, you talk to the
Okay.
person there, you have them order you a cab at a specific time. That cab shows
Mm-hmm.
up. You pay in cash. Then you pay in
Mm-hmm.
cash, and that takes you to the train station that has machines for tickets. You type in the city you want to go to, and you get the
Mm-hmm.
tickets there. Or you talk to a person. I actually paid in cash from a human being for a ticket there. They take you. Then you go to the airport. And I guess you can do that. And so you just wait until they give you a ticket for the time. You ask, when's the next available flight to Los Angeles? And then you do it.
Yeah.
And actually, cabs are now more functional, I feel like, in the US than Uber is at this point. So you just get in the cab line at the airport and you go to your destination.
So that was very well and good. I'm going to tell you something that's going to shock you. All right, and it's relevant to Gen
Yeah.
Z, and this is like you should look into this. Gen Z is actually struggling right now in the workplace because they don't know how to interact with things as simple as email. They don't know how to send email. They don't know how to do meetings. They don't know how to converse with people
Really.
outside of text messages. And so you're at a state where you were at the transition, the great transition of going online, right? So you actually grew up with the internet. Your mind was, formulated enough to where you got to see life before and after the internet. Well, Gen Z has never lived a single day without the internet. Okay. They don't know how to converse in the real world. And the further we get removed as a society from physical interaction, right, it's going to greatly be a great disadvantage to those who never participated in a world like that before.
Well, so I'm curious, like why is that a disadvantage for them? Because I agree with you, but I don't. It seems obvious to me, but I want someone else to put words on it.
So, I mean, I'm a survivalist. I think you know that about me. I like to go camping. I like to, you know,
Yeah.
I like to be out in nature. I like to be present and do all those things. And it's always in the back of my mind, like one EMP going off or a major cyber attack or something like that could ultimately just decimate our country. Right. And it's a real scary thought because a lot of people don't have the fundamental skills to operate in a world without that type of infrastructure.
Correct. And so the question becomes, but let's imagine that doesn't happen, right? So I think for me, it's almost more interesting if it doesn't happen. Does Gen Z wake up at some point? Like, do they double down on not knowing how to do those things and are just like, whatever, shut up, boomers. Like, I don't need that. I can excel without any of these things. I can be a digital avatar for the rest of my life and be happy doing it. Like, do they go that route? Or do they wake up and are like, you know, is their midlife crisis to just go off the grid?
I mean, it's such a loaded question because it ultimately boils down to this weird caste system that's coming back within our society. Caste systems in like India are very still common. We call them the middle class, low class, high class, whatever you want to say. But like here in the United States, class division is growing and it's escalating, right? And we're actually decimating the middle class right now through all the conversations we had relevant to how inflation's just decimating that, right? We've talked about that ad nauseum. So your question was, could Gen Z survive in this world and essentially shift society in that direction? The answer is only yes if that division amongst the classes here in the United States stabilizes. Because ultimately, no one will be able to live in a world where they're just a digital avatar because they won't be able to afford living the life that they want to live, right? That will only be afforded to those that are above the line, not below it.
So you don't even think the slaves get Ready Player One?
I mean, it will make sense in a weird way to keep the population docile, right? But it also only makes sense, right, if those in power have a profitability margin that affords them the lifestyle that they want. Because think about it,
Well,
right? Like, let's say
let's
all
assume
mass.
the status quo. I mean, it has to, but the question is, I guess actually, if you think about it, if Gen Z can't even fill out an email and they can't do the interpersonal skills, of what value are they even to the ruling class?
And this is why AI terrifies me because AI can do it all.
I mean, so it becomes, but then how do there's so many questions. So let's assume that, okay, the ruling class is uh, designing AI because it realizes that the up and coming workforce is just not useful. So they want AI to do
Mhm.
everything. But then what is AI actually really doing?
Well, I mean, AI is essentially putting resources in the maximum, the most maximum efficient possible place for those that control it to have the most amount of power. So I'll give you a better example, right? The supply chain is probably like humanity's last stand, right? Where do resources go? Right? We have X amount of corn, we have that, and that's the crop we have to essentially provide nutrients and allow people to live, right? How do we divvy out this corn, right? Currently, we have human beings that do it based on policy, right? Saying, oh, you know, this state should get this amount of corn, this population should get this amount of corn, right? And it's always driven by supply and demand and who can pay for it ultimately. But let's assume in a world like supply and demand is no longer driving this decision making process, right? Let's assume that AI is driving this process and saying, we actually want the corn to go here because we know if we put the corn here, it'll drive up uh, uh, profitability and productiveness in this region that will yield more profits for us. It all becomes a numbers game. What drives the most amount of profit? And there won't be human beings determining that. That will be AI.
But then who's just a few people passing around more and more profits, and then like everyone else just kind of doing what?
Well, so this is like a deeper question because I mean, it also goes back to population statistics. And globally, population is declining. Did you know that?
Yeah.
It's not
Yep.
going up. Population is actually going down. In places like
Yeah.
Japan and the United States, it's a
China.
real valid concern that the population will collapse in these major territories.
Yeah. Look, it's what's that show that every woman is afraid of, is terrified it's going to happen in this country? Like, what's that show again?
I know what you're talking about. It's not. I always want to say the Scarlet Letter, but it's not that. It's
No, it's not. They
uh
dress like it. Yeah, I, it's gonna hit me. But if you ask any woman between 20 and 50, they're like, this is the most terrifying show on that exists, right? It's the
I mean, the idea is terrifying for sure. I don't dismiss it whatsoever.
yeah, but look, anyway, we don't need to go there. But let me know if you remember the name of that. Anyway, it's long story short though, what I'm wondering though is like, okay, like for real, like what is Gen Z's move gonna be? Like, because like there's a lot of people there. They're very good at technology. So
Yeah.
they will probably figure out how to hack the AI.
Well, I mean, so what's funny about what you're talking about is actually kind of already happening, right? And I'm going to go back to like security cameras for a second. Like, like in Europe is like notoriously online, right? In terms of where their cameras, like there's CCTV like on every street corner. And there's this like really crazy movement in these European nations where they're starting to cut down CCTV cameras, right? They're trying to get rid of Big Brother. So, I mean, I do believe what you're saying is totally possible. But my other viewpoint though is I believe that we're going to develop a new market for Gen Z to participate in. And that's why I think space exploration and what Elon's doing with SpaceX is so important because it's pushing humanity into a new market. It's pushing them into a new frontier to where we can explore, grow as a species and, honestly prevent us from warring over what natural resources are left.
Well, does it feel touching back on martial arts from this perspective is if you can't manage the planet you currently have, should you be allowed to go touch others?
The answer is yes. The answer is yes, and it's a I'm saying it because like I actually agree with what you're suggesting, but it also comes down to the fact that I mean, at some point we're going to destroy ourselves. We are. It's just going to happen.
Why? Why
we
do
can't
we just take that? Why do we assume that? Where does that assumption come from? Or is that just programming?
It's programming and it's the law of probability. It's not zero. All right, it's not zero. So on a long enough timeline, Sam, on a long enough timeline, I'm not saying next year, I'm not saying 10 years, not in our lifetime, not in our children's lifetime. I'm saying on a long enough timeline, either the sun is going to explode, right? Which that is going to happen. It's going to turn into a black hole and just suck the earth into it, right? Or we're going to destroy ourselves. And so it is actually humanity's imperative to go to the stars.
So I would simply say, are we certain that we'll be destroyed by whatever this thing is prior to us figuring out how to actually, be good stewards for the planet and actually like get our act together. It's not that hard. It's really not that hard. Like all it would require is like general human decency and cooperation and mindfulness, and it would just be fine.
So, Sam, the thing that should keep you up at night and terrify you, and I don't want to add to any anxiety that you might have, is it only takes one person. The thing is, humanity as a whole could be just in absolute stasis and harmony, and we're just practicing, love and companionship and just trying to propel our society forward, and that's beautiful. All it takes is one person with one button and to press it. That's it. That's it. And it's kind of crazy when you start thinking about what Doctor Strangelove, that fantastic movie, like put forward into our consciousness, which is if one bomb and one missile gets launched from the United States towards Russia or Iran, right? It only takes one push of a button to possibly end humanity.
Yeah, but Jason, I'm talking about like, all right, I understand that is the risk. However, if we actually lived in a world where there was a consciousness transformation change, right, where you were just not incentivized to have that happen, like no one would be incentivized, and also people were smart enough and conscious enough to realize that you would never allow that person near the controls for that, or they, like that's
Sorry,
the
you lost me there. You lost me there, man. You lost me there. I think what you're saying is the way it should be. It's noble, it's beautiful, but I'll just give you a fact. I'll ask you a question first. Is the United States presidential election determined by the popular vote? It's not, right? It's not. So just think about that for a second. If humanity in the United States is just, the needles move to the green zone, right? Ultimately, it could take just a small group of people to send it the other way.
well, sure. But what I'm simply saying is like, what if you got to like 80%, like decent and intelligent? Then you could create a streamlined system where at this point you'd largely be able to clean up the planet. You'd largely be able to manage things. And then you could go off and do space exploration. And then if one person happened to push the wrong button, okay, you might lose a planet. But at the very least, everyone else would still know how to manage a planet, which we currently don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's my simple point is like, if at least enough people figured out how to manage a planet, you could then pass a test and be allowed to leave the planet.
Okay, so you said something I vehemently disagree with, and this is the ELAV8 podcast. You said allowed to leave. You said allowed to leave. You're gonna, you know what? That actually goes against my dude Sam Messman's ideology. If you decide you want to leave this planet and you have the means to leave this planet, should anyone stop you? Should they have the ability to do that? That's a pretty big question.
Actually, look, I'm not always right. But I mean, really, no, they shouldn't. However, I would simply say, like, if you are aggressively like toxic or cancerous,
yeah,
should somebody not shoot you out of the sky?
Fair enough. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yes, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah. I mean, if you're posturing, I mean, and matter of fact, we do this with our air defense systems here in the United States. Israel does it. What's happening with the Iron Dome? If a perceived threat enters our airspace, the United States has the sovereign ability and choice to eliminate that threat if they believe it is one, right? So, yeah, if you believe there is a threat against humanity, there is the ability to make that choice, yes.
Because like the flip side is then you would just allow. I mean, like it's like fish in a fish tank, right? If you put the wrong fish in the fish tank, it eats the other fish, and then you have no more fish. Everything's dead. So
yeah,
don't let the fish in the fish tank.
Okay. Hmm. I'm just seeing this right now from the perception of an extraterrestrial, right? Like, oh no, they're finally off planet. They're heading towards Mars. Like, what do we do?
Well, look,
Like,
they're probably paying attention. I mean, look, if I was an alien and I'm watching us, I'm like, oh, they're clearly not ready yet. Let's go and sabotage that space shuttle launch or whatever is going to happen. They won't see it coming. They're too dumb. Like they're still, figuring out how to kill each other around the monolith, period from 2001 A Space Odyssey. There's just monkeys around a monolith. So
mhm.
that's what I would say, Mars. But then, suddenly they get off planet, but then maybe humanity becomes the perceived threat to another species of extraterrestrial life because we are clearly warlike and not necessarily the nicest people.
Really aren't that nice, huh?
You ever see Starship Troopers?
It's one of my favorite movies. I love that movie.
I mean, dude, like, were they the good guys?
Well, okay, the bugs did send rocks. Okay, they sent rocks across space and they like crashed into our planet, killing lots of people. Just saying.
They did that. But what did we do to the bugs?
We invaded their planet.
I mean, that was for me when I
we
watched that movie. Like, we're clearly like, like killing the leader at the end and really being excited about it and like, and all of this. And when you look at that scene, right? Like, imagine you just weren't rooting for that football team. Like you're actually rooting for the other football team. Probably comes off maybe like you guys aren't the heroes here.
I mean, it's a funny concept. I did that with the Karate Kid recently because of Cobra Kai. Right? I was like, was Daniel really the good guy? I'm not so sure anymore. I'm not so sure. Like Johnny kind of got ganged up on by the new kid. It's kind of a
How
weird
did he
movie
get
when you
ganged
start
up on
watching.
by the new kid? Unpack that. Actually, I haven't watched the original in a while.
Okay. So new kid comes in. All right, enters his gym, plays a prank on him. Don't forget, like Daniel pours water on Johnny at the dance when he's wearing his skeleton outfit. He
Yeah.
he makes the first punch. He like throws the first strike. He really does. If you watch the movie back, it's like the story's told from Daniel's point of view, but Daniel always he always instigates in every aspect. It's a good
Huh.
movie. It's a good
I gotta
movie when you
rewatch
watch
this.
it that way.
So wait, he just poured water.
Yeah,
I don't really
rewatch it.
remember the inciting incident. So Johnny didn't say something like an asshole to start it off. Like there wasn't a comment made to pour the water
Well,
on him.
he was teasing him and stuff. Like there was some teasing, and Daniel was like trying to be like, don't forget, like he tried to steal his girl. Like there's all these like little moments where Johnny could have let it go, and he did, and he starts escalating after that. After he gets the water pour on him, that's when it really starts escalating.
Interesting.
It's a good movie. Watch it again. I would love your thoughts. But dude, we're coming up on an hour. It's also midnight where you're at. This was a fascinating conversation. Right, lead us out, man. Let's have some stuff to digest, and hopefully you're ready to go tomorrow.
All right.
In Italy.
Well, coming back to my original question, I guess to you. Well, with all of it, right? So you have Eastern medicine, you have Western medicine, you have this idea of one cut, but you also have this idea of like, well, I could just Google and get any information that I ever wanted, right? So the only reason that I even found that place was because of Google, right? So for me, there's this weird, I think it's both. I think the answer for me is both. Like I want the internet and I also want the mindfulness and, an ability to do critical thinking that comes with proper practice and study and all of that. So I think as we look into the future, I'll finish with this question, Jace, which is, for me it just feels like everything is literally at our fingertips, which is, the best and worst possible combination for humanity. How do you think humanity should approach that based on what we talked about today.
I mean, if we're going to talk about Ready Player One, because we did touch on it earlier, one thing they did in that movie that I was like, that is the way, is there was a mandatory rest day where you couldn't go in to their metaverse, right? Like it was turned off on Sundays, I think is what they turned it off. It's like you had to go outside. Is that either humanity needs to learn discipline or we need to create these just pockets right within our consciousness to
Why
where
do
we
we
turn it
want a
off.
metaverse though? For real though, actually, we'll finish with this. This is actually the thing I want to know. Is like, why do people want the metaverse so bad, and why do they think it'll be a better existence?
Because it is for them. Think about it,
How
just
is it?
real quick,
Okay.
real quick. Sam, you're a very successful, very charming, very handsome, talented man. All right. You earn these
Thank you,
things,
Jason.
right? You earn these things through experience. You earn these things through struggle, pain, and progress, right? Whereas we have been programmed to expect things now with immediacy, right? The metaverse gives you immediacy. It gives you immediacy to achieving something that you want to be instantly. There is no pain, there is no progress, there is no journey. And so the metaverse for them, I'm choosing my words very carefully, for them is perfect because they don't have to go through those struggles to earn what you have today.
And does it? I guess that's yeah. Look, I think you're right. And I don't even know that what I have is like it. Look, I'm not unhappy, but like I'm like I don't think most people would see me and be like, oh, I want to be that dude. You know, like the thing that is just weird to me is just like, wouldn't you just get bored at a certain point knowing that it's all fake?
They don't know. Your life experience shows you what could be, right? This is very important. You have a life experience that shows you before and after. What I'm trying to say is the younger population gets, right? And the further we get away from where we are in terms of them and their experiences, is that's all they know. They don't know the difference between going to Italy like you are to now experiencing it, or just climbing into the metaverse and experiencing a digital representation of it. Why would they? There's no frame of reference. And that's what we're losing is the frame of reference gets further and further away from the actualization and realization of consciousness, the more the metaverse will be accepted.
So maybe we'll finish here, which is it possible that there's a sliding door reality for the people, like, and it might just literally be self-reinforcing, right? Where a large group of people will just go into the metaverse because it's the easiest option for them to play whatever part they feel like they deserve, but didn't really want to put any time, work, or effort into it, while the rest of humanity just like, oh, it seems boring. I'd rather just go places and figure out how to do that, and like chooses the real world, good and bad, but chooses to put in the work, I guess. So and then at a certain point they just go off into different dimensions.
Yes, that's what will happen.
Oh no.
There's no like exposition that's what will happen. Is people lose themselves to drugs all the time. People will lose themselves to digital representations of what could be.
Well, now we're getting into the deeper spiritual, religious overtones of some of that, if you think about it. Because in all of these religions,
Yes.
there's like, so
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting, Jace?
It's all, dude. Yes. It's all interesting. That's why we talk every week.
There it is.
And why our episodes come out every Tuesday at 8 a.m. PST. So,
all right, elevators. We're not going to keep
elevators.
I can't.
Yeah, that's going to go.
I can't do it.
If you have any suggestions on what we should call the audience, please put them forth. But hey, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you here next time on the Elevate Podcast. Peace.